Hey, friends. Welcome back into Suns Today. A different edition today. If you've been following the Suns for a long time, this is actually a really exciting moment for me personally. We've had a chance to interview players and coaches from a ton of different eras around UCF, but never had a coach during the Josh Heupel era. Most of them are still employed and not easy to get a hold of, and/or they've got other things, and/or they won't return my calls. But I was lucky enough to track down Shane Burnham, who coached the D line for UCF in those Heupel days. And he joined me on this edition of Suns Today. He's going to talk a lot about the team, sort of the takeover from the Frost days, how things kind of unraveled via COVID. And then he's got a really interesting role right now that I think is very unique to what's happening in college athletics. So, yeah, stay tuned. You don't want to miss what's coming up with Shane Burnham. But before I tell you all that, I have to tell you about my good friends at Werner, Hoffman, Greg, and Garcia. Find them at wernerhoffman.com. If you need legal advice, particularly right now, I know a lot of you are still dealing with some damage post-hurricanes. If you want some advice, you want to understand maybe what your options are, you're getting the runaround. Our good friend Michael Hoffman is a UCF alum. He's a veteran. He's somebody who just genuinely wants to help people. And if you reach out and give him a call, 1-800-320-HELP or wernerhoffman.com, he can give you some good unsolicited advice and point you in the right direction. So please check out our friends at Werner, Hoffman, Greg, and Garcia. Now, let's check out our time with former UCF coach Shane Burnham. All right, really excited for this. Welcome back to Suns Today. If you've been following us for a long time, we've talked to a lot of different players and coaches throughout the eras of UCF, but never have we talked to a coach that was there during the Josh Heupel regime, if you will. And the good news is that changes tonight because we have Shane Burnham, former defensive line coach under Coach Heupel and Coach Shannon on that staff, 2018 to 2020. He was a part of that group, and now he's the director of football at Ascension Sport. We'll get to all that in a second, Coach. But first off, thanks for hopping in. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk and relive a little bit of that 2018 to 2020 run. Great memories there, and I look forward to catching up with you, Adam, about this.
Well, let me start at the beginning, right? Because help me understand how coaching works, right? So obviously, Scott Frost moves on, and it's announced that Josh Heupel and Randy Shannon are hired on the same day, which seems a little abnormal, but we'll get that in a second. You were at Rutgers at that point in time, so how does a staff get put together like that quickly, where you go from coaches hired on this day to a whole full staff is already kind of built out in a couple of weeks?
True story. I'm sitting in a hotel in Orlando, whatever the night Josh was announced. I don't know the timeline. I couldn't tell you, but I want to say it was about the time he was announced. I was in a Orlando hotel room, one of the Marriott properties that I always stay in. And I remember calling my wife Megan back in Iowa City or in Ames up in Iowa State and said, "Hey, man, I wish I knew Josh. I wish I had a way to get to Josh. I've always recruited Florida, grew up in Tallahassee, and my old man was the D coordinator at USF for Jim Leavitt for a long time. And, he was at Florida State. So I just knew the potential. I just thought UCF would be great. So what happened was I loosely associated, knew Josh through a few different loose connections, reached out. It didn't go anywhere. I knew Randy. Randy had come and spent time with us at Iowa State when he was out. So he had spent some time with our staff and knew Randy somewhat. So I kind of gave up on it. And then long story short, another common connection happened to be talking to Josh. They were looking for a guy who had recruited St. Pete, Tampa, and had success there recruiting. And then one thing led to another, phone interview, so on and so forth. But yeah, I was super excited to come. I was sitting down with the head coach at Rutgers at the time, and Chris Ash was his name. So Chris, he said, "I don't understand. You're in the Big Ten. How are you leaving the Big Ten to go down there to Orlando and UCF?" And I just, for many reasons, I believed in UCF, and I'm super happy that we made that decision.
Yeah, I'm curious. What were those reasons? What attracted you about UCF and that opportunity?
I felt like, first of all, from a family man point of view, as a coach, right, it's really hard on wives and kids. I have 4 daughters. I just had my 4th at the time. You can recruit from your backyard at UCF. What I mean is I could get up literally on Monday morning. If I wanted to leave at 4:30, I could be sitting at Armwood's parking lot at 6:30, or I could be down at IMG. And it seems like a small thing, but for me to be able to put my kids to bed on a Sunday night, not be in a hotel, not be flying down from Iowa State or Rutgers or wherever the places I'd been, it seemed quality of life. I knew you could get great ball players in your backyard. They were having the run with Scott. We played UCF back when I was in college when Dante, when they made that first inaugural transition, and we played Dante up at Williams-Brice. I just always had a recognition of what I thought the program could be, and coming off that historic run, that season, knew there was talent in the program, had seen them on tape, actually, Adam versus Michigan the year before. So in 2016, I think if you went back and watched that Michigan tape, that UCF defense got after Michigan. And I remember sitting at Rutgers thinking, man, they can run. They got players. So all that was in my mind. I just knew the potential of the job. I knew what Dad and those guys had built with Jim at South Florida from scratch. I'd seen it been done here at Florida State with Bobby and Dad and those guys. And it's a sleeping giant. It still is. It's an amazing place.
It's funny, after that Michigan game, I remember Scott Frost said that he thought that UCF, quote, out-hit Michigan that day, even though they lost like 52-6 or something, and everybody laughed at him and said he was an idiot and blah blah blah. But to your point, that was a really good springboard for UCF. But you came in an interesting time, Coach. I'm curious. We've talked to a lot of guys from that Frost staff, right? And you taking over a team that was winless in 2015, right? Got to change the culture. Got to make a lot of changes. You're walking in December, January of 2017, 2018 there, and this is a team that had won every game. They just won a Peach Bowl. They won a national championship by Danny White's assertion, right? And so how does that present a different challenge for you walking into a group of guys who are like, hey, we're already in the top, Coach? How does that challenge kind of differ from maybe where you've been throughout in your career?
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a different challenge, and Hype attacked that. I remember one of our first meetings, that was a point of emphasis as he went through his plan and some of the challenges that would present. And, it was just, they had trust in Scott. They had trust in that staff. They had been to the pinnacle, undefeated, entire season and all that success. So when you come in and you do anything different, probably like Kalen DeBoer, I'm sure Kalen has had success everywhere he's been, obviously, and what he does has been sound and work. But just the fact that it's different than Nick, or that Josh was doing something different than Scott, there was that challenge. I think you want to meet the kids in the middle almost. I think Hype, what's great about Josh Heupel, and the reason he'll win everywhere he goes, is Josh has a great feel for the locker room and the heartbeat of that room and kind of how the energy flows. And I think he knew that there was that balance that needed to be hit, which was they need to have some input in this program, whether that's from a leadership, council type standpoint. We don't want to change this. These are things that are inherent to the program that we want to keep. And then also just knowing that you needed to explain the why, right? Whether that's my kids, maybe that's just kids, but the why. They needed to understand the why behind what we were doing, why it was different. And there were some things radically different. Our defense was radically different than what those guys had been doing up front. Went from a cover type style to an attacking. Yeah, all that had to be more thought out in how we delivered it.
Was there, you have to name names. Was there pushback? Was there receptiveness from the players initially at some of the things that you all want to do differently?
Yeah, I think I'll say specifically with the D-line room, you went from, I don't know what the numbers were on defense, but that they'd won a championship and they were playing a read style of front where Tristan and those guys would, try to stay frontal, in my opinion, on offensive linemen. And there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, just get it skint. And they did it that way. And they would stay in front, and we came and we changed their stances and got real narrow and almost track style, almost like you watch the 49ers or how they play now, actually, with Gus. But we're vertical, and that was just a huge, to build why are we changing, like I said, and then to build a confidence in the technique, to break a technique, to build a technique back up, and then, hey, it's going to play out for you here next fall. Trust us. That would be a specific example. It might be for Josh, just the importance of the tempo and the structure of the between the snap stuff, right? Where might have been different with Josh versus Scott and how they structured that and getting the buy-in. Josh would film the all 22. So you get, as a coach's copy, you get sideline tight or sideline end zone. And I remember Josh will always film the entire thing. Just first turn the camera on, turn it off when it's over, and all the things that happen in between. And he coached a lot of that, the way they operated between the snaps. So that was different. And those are specific examples, I think, where kids had to trust what we were doing.
Obviously, there's a ton of talent, to your point, on that roster. As you kind of walked into the defensive side of the ball, were there key players that you were like, man, I can't wait to coach this kid, I can't wait to coach that kid, just based on what you had scouted and what you had seen before you got to UCF?
Yeah, no doubt. Tristan, Tristan Hill was the guy that stuck out. There's not many big men like that twitchy, that athletic at that size. So he stuck out. He stuck out on the tape as a young player back. Might have been a freshman in 17, but he stuck out. I thought Titus just I noticed him at times in the games you guys had played the previous year. I knew the guys from I knew the twins from St. Pete. We had recruited those guys at Iowa State. So again, I had an awareness of a lot of the kids on the roster just because we had recruited them at Iowa State or at Rutgers, and so I was excited about a lot of them. But those Tristan in particular, and then Titus. Once we moved Titus, we were kind of toying with him at linebacker, and I probably became more excited the more time I got with Titus as we transitioned to DN that spring.
How long do you think it took before, you felt like the guys really bought in, the system was kind of there? How long did it take before you were like, okay, now we got it. We got it now.
I thought it was a fight for 6 weeks. I really thought the first half of that season, and I'd have to go back and look at scores and see how we played. If my mind, if my memory.
You gave up 36 to FAU that first year.
That was early.
Yep.
Could not tackle the quarterback or the running back, the good running back. I'm not Pollard. He was at Memphis, but the kid who went to the
NFL. Motor Singletary,
ran crazy on us. He did. I don't know. The last half, it just felt like they understood what we were doing. There was more buy-in, and to be honest with you, when the way the offense operated with Hype and probably with Scott, but with Hype as well, we lived on TFL. Hype's mandate was this, Adam, when he got here: you're going to be front multiple, and you're going to be aggressive as heck, and we're going to live off the TFL, the negative play. As an offensive coordinator, I think he hates having to go. And if you're stationary and he knows where you're going to be, watch out. So I think just on his mind was, hey, we're going to be what I hate to defend. And his mandate was let's be front multiple and be able to do everything we do out of every front, which that was a big gulp on my end. And then secondly was let's live on the TFL. That's, people cannot operate. And if kind of like when they were at Baylor with Jeff and those guys, if we can turn 7 into 3 as a defense, the way that offense operated. So for us as a defense, the kids loved it because we got to be real aggressive.
Yeah, how much of a challenge was it defensively, right? I think a lot of the good of the Heupel offense was high scoring, right? We put up points in bunches really, really quickly. The negative was when we went 3 and out, that was like 17 seconds off the game clock, right? How much of a frustration or how hard was that for you defensively to say, all right, my kids just got on the sideline, they probably barely sat down, had a sip of Gatorade, and they're already back standing up to go back on the field? How challenging was that?
Honestly, they scored so much I didn't care. If as long as they scored 3 and out, they scored more than they went 3 and out, so I didn't mind. I'd never played with that kind of offense before. I've coached with that kind of offense. Pete Lembo, when I was with him at Elon, he had a good offense with Scott Riddle. But long story short, we scored. I didn't care. I hated practicing against it, Adam, more than I minded the games. It was hard to get at practice. The tempo was so fast. You felt like at times you were wasting reps on defense. What I mean, you couldn't get your cleat in the ground. You couldn't get in a good stance, or you needed to, and they didn't always get in a good stance. And I thought that always robbed us of a good coaching rep, so to speak. So I'd get upset in practice about the tempo. I don't think Hype cared if I was upset. But on Saturdays, I didn't mind. Again, they were so productive and they were so prolific. I mean, half the time I'd be over there coaching and I'd catch myself watching, AK or McKenzie or somebody, Gabe, and they were just so prolific. I thought that it was a pleasure to coach with that offense.
I'm curious if there was a turning point in that season, and I wonder specifically if you would give me this answer. The game at Memphis, we're down pretty late in the game, right? And all of a sudden, we need some theatrics. McKenzie makes a legendary run where he kind of flips over backwards, Gabe with a touchdown. And the play I'll never forget, the Josh Heupel "Let's Go Bone" call where Tristan Hill like spreads a hole the size of a freeway that Taj McGowan kind of runs through. Was that game sort of a moment where you kind of walked away and said, okay, we got something here. Now we're locked and loaded?
I think watching McKenzie go out there that week, I don't think we thought he'd play. I mean, if you knew the kid is so tough, but to watch him go out there and do that, on the sideline as a coach or as a player, you feel indebted to the kid. Like, oh man, we gotta match that. And then the play you mentioned on the 4th down play with Tristan, and yeah, at that point it became like, oh, we are not going to lose. There's something special about this group again, and whether that's real or not, we thought that. That's, to me, it felt like at that moment that. But what was strange about that game, and there's a couple other games probably. Again, I'd have to go back. It's been 7 years, but I remember on the sideline and being like, "Hey guys, we should be stressed out right now. You guys are way too calm." And that was the case for that team. There was a couple other games that I have to go back and look at, but. I remember having that thought, and maybe speaking it into the headphones, is, man, these guys, there's not a pulse. And I think what I thought at the time was, I'm not sure if they're into the game. I think in their mind was, maybe it was based on 17, the belief in KZ, whatever it was. they just kind of felt like we got this. And there was never a panic. I remember that at halftime at Memphis being like, okay, I wish there was more panic. I wish there was more panic in the sideline, but they had that confidence. But that was a turning point.
All right, I'm sure the statute of limitations is expired by now, as you said. 4th and 1 from our own 29, and you see the offense going. Were you like, come on, John, what are we doing here, John? Were you at all like, I don't know if this one's going to work out?
I had a lot of those moments with hype where I was like, God dang, man, I know the book probably says it, but I don't care about the book. I remember, again, I said I loved coaching with that offense. I remember there was a game, Cincinnati 20. Cincinnati 20. I think we had 11 series we defended in the first half. I think we took the ball away 3 times. We played really good defense, but I remember going into halftime thinking, dang, 11 series in one half. That's amazing stuff. But yeah, they were just the bone and hype going on 4th down. Again, you just kind of learn to live with it. Mike's that way at Florida State. When I was with Mike the last 3 years, he was really aggressive on 4th down. And there's times you can go back to Georgia Tech in 2020, Georgia Tech. We won that game. We were down 7-0. Hype backed up on his own 25, goes for it. We convert. Anyways, that was the life with hype.
Obviously that year too, a moment that I think obviously a lot of us remember where we were, and it's certainly something that changed the trajectory of his career and of the time, was the game against the Cows in Tampa. McKenzie goes down with that gruesome injury. Can you've been coaching football a long time. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things that you'd love to forget, but can you take us back to that moment? Just your emotions, just felt like the entire air just got sucked out of the sidelines after that McKenzie play.
I've only, prior to this past fall with Jordan here at Florida State, and what happened against, I guess it was North Alabama, week 10 or 11. And even that was different. But yeah, those are the 2 moments I can think of that just come right to mind. The air came out of the stadium. That's great. The gravity, I think, on the sidelines, you knew just from the way guys were responding, the doctors, the medical staff, you could see that this was, this is a big deal. So I think, and again, just who he was, and just like Jordan, he was our team, he was our backbone, and it was just a really heavy, emotional moment at the time because the kid was so beloved. So it was a really, it was an emotional moment.
Well, take us to that next week, because now Daryl Mack comes in. We win that game against the Cows, but now we got to play Memphis again, this time at home, obviously in the championship game. And what was the week of preparation like, kind of leading into that game, where you got the chance for another back-to-back, but obviously there's a huge thing that's kind of changed the dynamic. What was the energy like that week going into practice?
Well, I'll start with this, and I love Mike Norvell. I'll start by caveat. Mike Norvell is one of the best, and I have a lot of respect for Mike and Josh. But we got some flowers. We came in the office that Monday, if I remember. Maybe it was Sunday, but I thought it was Monday. And there was a big bouquet of flowers from the Memphis staff to McKenzie, to our staff, and it just struck us all. I don't know what it did. It just it was sitting on our secretary's desk. We came walking in for the staff meeting. It just struck us wrong. I don't know. That week, so it never felt heavy. From that point, once the way KZ responded and the messages he was sending from the hospital, he gave a lot of comfort to our kids. And I think that, the Ohana thing started going crazy. It was almost like, well, again, like last year with Florida State, I almost felt like there was no way we were going to lose against Louisville or Florida last year. The defense was going to rise up, and that's what it was with KZ. I just thought, Memphis is good, but we're at home. Ohana's happening. I just didn't think there was any way, unless we got too emotional, that it would not happen for us. And then the first half, they came out and got in Wildcat, which we had, in talking to Mike, if you talk to Mike right now, he had went back into the 2015 season, and he had found some film of Randy and had their Wildcat check he had to go 3 years back to 15, but he got Randy's Wildcat check, and that's why they got in the Wildcat that first half. And if you remember, man, they got.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know about you. I still have nightmares about Darrell Henderson running free against our defense. I imagine that's got to be even worse for you.
It was. So, I remember going at halftime, and we were like, "Where is this wild?" But Mike had always been different. But yeah, that was a great job by Mike and that staff getting to Randy's history. But at halftime, we made an adjustment. I think if you go back and look at the second half, it was, maybe my mind's wrong, but I feel like in the second half we kind of took over and Tristan and Joey and some of those guys kind of went crazy. But yeah, that was that week. I really felt like we weren't going to lose Adam. I just felt like the kids would rise up around what had happened with KZ, and then the quarterback went crazy, right? Mac went crazy and had 5 touchdowns or whatever he had. And then and the stadium was great. That environment there, by the way, I tell people all the time, Adam, not that game in particular, but any game we were there. Just the environment at a place like UCF, people don't appreciate how good it is. And I've been everywhere. I've played in the SEC, coached in the Big 12, Big 10, ACC, American. I mean, you name it, I've been there. And I'm telling you, that environment in that stadium is and that day, Ohana was so cool. So.
Yeah, you all held them to 3 points in the second half in that championship game. But I think one of the most iconic moments about that game too that I remember is, and I forget who it was, but a player got injured, near kind of the goal line, and Heupel walked out to kind of check on him and came back in and started kind of getting his arms kind of up and going. How much did that, like, we didn't see a lot of that from Josh Heupel, right? At the podium, all we saw is all 3 phases and get on the grass and one play at a time, go 1-0. Like, we saw a lot of Heupelisms, but that was kind of the first time I think he showed a lot of emotion. Was that common for him, or is that even something that you as coaches were like, okay, like let's go do this now?
Not Mike. I'm sorry. Josh has. There's guys who have it, and I don't know how you describe it, what it is, but whether it's the quarterback in him and having been on that stage and having to bet on himself and win, whether it was snow or back to Oklahoma or, what happened with him at Oklahoma to Utah State. Guys like him have it. I remember, we did a talent show one time. This is different, but this is KZ, or maybe was it DG or KZ? We're doing a talent show, maybe my first month on campus, and I think it was KZ. It must have been KZ.
It had to be KZ.
He walked in, and he did the bottle trick. He threw the bottle up in the air, and it landed, which is like a YouTube thing where kids, and it seems like something small, but like anybody else would do that, and it wouldn't land. McKenzie, first time it lands. That seems dumb to say that, but Heupel, he's the kind of guy, if you're playing pickup basketball, he's going to come across half court and say, hey, once I get across half court, I'm in range. That's just him. That's KZ. That's even a lot of the great head coaches I've been around. But Hype had that swagger, that confidence. I think we believed in that as a staff. You got to believe in the guy that's leading you, and you can't fool kids. And he had that always. That moment was cool, but he always had the pulse of the team. Like I said earlier, that's just something. He's a coach's kid, and he just gets football.
I don't know if you have much in way of games that you'd like back, or games that you felt like you really want another opportunity. But that Fiesta Bowl against LSU, that felt like a game that we were in. They came back a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts? Is if you could play that game over again tomorrow, like is that one you would sign up for right away and say, I want that one again. I want that one second time. Yeah,
great team. By the way, great team they had. And maybe didn't know at the time how good they were. Thought we knew, but in hindsight. I'll get in trouble for saying this, which is not the first time. I wish Joey had went like a foot higher. I wish Joey Connors had gone like a foot or two higher. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's almost like he peeled back on that. I don't know if it was Bam or who had the pick. Whoever had the pick.
Bam Moore. Yep.
He peeled back, and it was like slow motion. And I thought, okay, this guy's done. Like, we finished Joey. He's out of the game. And he got up, and it was like Rocky getting off the mat. But I go back, and we had if you remember, I want to say it was first quarter, maybe second quarter. Randy Charlton shows up.
It's penalty.
It's a hit, and the rule is always give the ball back to the official. That's always what you tell the kids when the play's over. If you have the ball, offense, defense, hand it back to the official. That way, there's none of this, and you don't drop the ball early going across the goal line. All those things. And Randy hit strip sack, would have been just a sack, would have put him probably out of field goal range. We're getting the ball back 14-3, I think it was.
Yep.
And we get a 15-yard. Like he makes the play. He thinks he has a strip sack. He's running towards the sideline, and he threw the ball. And it's like in slow motion, you see it happening at him, and you're like, no. And I thought the game changed. I think they converted a third down, post corner, or something like that for a touchdown a few plays later. And I thought the game just kind of slowly. I thought we had a chance there. I don't know if we could have scored there, but I thought, man, we forced a punt, 14-3. I thought that was the turning point of that game. So I don't know if you remember that play or not.
I do. No, I was at that game. I watched it back. To your point, rule's a rule, right? Like, but I think that's one that wasn't super egregious. Like he didn't like plant the ball on the ground. Like to your point, it was more like a I just kind of dropped it through excitement. The guys were jumping around him. I think he just, I don't think it was intentional, I guess, from what I could tell on camera.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I thought it took, again, I mean, officials are officials and you can't leave it in their hands, but I thought it took – anyways, yeah, I thought it was unnecessary, but I thought it changed the tone of that game. They scored, made it, whether it was 14-10, I don't know. Again, we couldn't stop the run. We couldn't get a pass rush. We actually were decent versus the run, I thought, in the first half. But we couldn't really rush the passer, and they got open on some big plays in the second half. And I thought in the first half we hung around, but that play would have – that game, and the other game I tell you about is, and I don't know if it would have made a difference. Tulsa, we're on the road there. We're coming out of half. We scored a touchdown from a long way out to put the game probably out of reach. They called a holding call. So that Tulsa was a tough one. At Cincinnati, we only lost a couple. So the one at Cincinnati on the road, we got down to the red zone early. We, anyways, the Cincinnati games stick out.
Yeah, we had a bugaboo with both Tulsa and Cincinnati the last couple of seasons. But before we get to that, I want to start back at the top of 2019. So obviously, McKenzie's going to be out now at this point. Daryl Mack unfortunately gets injured in spring. I think he had a basketball injury, right? Breaks his ankle.
That's right.
Wimbush comes in. Brandon Wimbush comes in from Notre Dame. And we have this freshman from Hawaii, Dylan Gabriel, on the roster, right? How quickly did you see in Dylan Gabriel, like, hey, this kid may have something?
There's just a maturity of those kind of kids you meet. Again, I'm not going to say it. I keep saying it. I don't want to give too many guys it. But, you just knew he was a mature kid when he came in, the way he handled himself, the way he approached his work in the building. There's guys who handle themselves like pros before they're pros. And, it's that's what he was. First in the building, really attentive, really good with notes, really humble in the way that he'd take feedback or encourage other teammates, just assimilated himself really quickly in the way he'd engage, and he wasn't shy about any of those things. So you knew fairly early. I think the relationship with KZ helped, right? It allowed him and emboldened him probably a little bit because, KZ had him on his arm, so to speak. And I think that probably bought him some instant credibility because they were hand in hand in that whole process, I thought. But it didn't take long, Adam. I mean, you knew DG had it too. Again, that's why he's done it everywhere he's been. He just replicates that over and over.
Well, you maybe can answer one of the bigger mysteries I think a lot of UCF fans would have. Brandon Wimbush starts the first game against FAMU. We win 62-0, right? Obviously, FAMU is probably a lesser inferior opponent. And he's never seen from again. And Dylan Gabriel starts the next week and the rest of the season. What can you explain the quarterback moves there? Like why Wimbush week one and then never again, or any insight as to how that happened?
Yeah, I don't remember all the details. You get so tied up in wondering why Anthony Montalvo got reached or something. But you spend all your time with that. But yeah, I think you probably you have that catalog of reps. I forget when he came in. You said spring maybe or summer. Whenever he came in, I think you watch it in practice and you could just kind of see, to me, there was a difference. And I don't know what led to that actual decision, how that played out in that game. But to me, it was pretty obvious as we went through 29, 25 days of camp. Like there was separation to me. And I think probably, I'm putting words in Josh's mouth, you probably felt there might have been, I don't know what was talked about in the recruiting process, but sure. You probably felt like Brandon.
That takes a lot of balls, though, Coach. Like Brandon Wimbush coming from Notre Dame, an established starter, Dylan Gabriel, a true freshman. I mean, that takes a lot of balls for a coach. I mean, UCF fans right now today, as you and I were recording this, there's a lot of talk about the right quarterback decision getting made for UCF in 2024. It takes a lot of balls after one game to go, you know what? Yes, you're a transfer. Yes, you're a highly touted quarterback, but I got this freshman and I'm rolling with that person.
It does, but you don't come across many guys like DG in your career. KZ, I mean, that's where UCF fans – hope they do realize, right? And I don't have no clue how the quarterback play's been since I left, so I'm not commenting on that at all. But you had those two guys, you had Dante, you've had some really elite guys. It doesn't take you long when you got a guy that special. Like it doesn't. I mean, again, he's proven it. At OU, again at Oregon, number one team in the country. You just don't come across many of those guys. It's Braden Fisk. Right? Again, I'm jumping. This is not UCF related, but I'm jumping here. Braden Fisk, when he got in our building at Florida State last spring, he had a sling. He didn't practice the entire spring. You already knew. You just already knew. You knew based on the tape and the way the kid behaved that I told every scout he's going to sign 3 contracts. And they'd say, no, he's not. He's too short-armed. I'm like, okay. he's a pro before he's a pro. Same with DG. Like some kids just have that, and you see it. You know, you've been around long enough to know. So I don't think it's as hard as you think. In that particular instance, and I don't think it's as hard. Now I think we've all maybe made mistakes as coaches, thinking, thinking a guy has it, but those guys are different. DG's different.
Well, he comes out the next week, and we just ambush Stanford and win that one, pretty handily, right? Awesome. Get ourselves into a top 15 ranking at that point in time, and then we go to Pitt, Coach, and Pitt was clearly ready for us, right? And that was one of those games too where you talked earlier where we were kind of feeling the motions, it felt like, and at some point now you start coming back. The late Otis Anderson, rest his soul, had a fantastic punt return for a touchdown. Really gets momentum back into it, and then they run that stupid Pitt special play. That's got to kill you as a coach, right? That kind of trickery type stuff. Yeah, and they printed shirts afterwards, by the way, which is soft. But either way, that kind of play has got to kill you.
Yeah, here's my memories of that game. My memories of that game were we caught about 3 deep fade balls with a foot out of bounds. I felt like if you went back, there was 3 fade balls that we caught. One of the big receiver, anyways, with a foot out. Like we hit about 3 fade balls with a foot out of bounds. I remember thinking, God, dog, we're so close. Then we have 4th and 5 on that last drive. And you don't remember this, but we had a defensive lineman who I will not name, who we have a timeout. We're leaving the 4th down, 4th and 5.
He jumped off sides. Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. So the final reminder is always, hey, alert to offsides. And we had a game on where this guy was actually going to be, the looper, the wrapper. He was the second in the stunt. So getting off the ball immediately wasn't even that important for what he was required to do. So that to me, that was a heartbreaker. That game was disappointing. We had gotten after him so good in 2018. Yeah. And I just felt like, we had some penalties on defense. We had a face man. Anyways, we Cam Good had a late hit. We just did some really foolish things that day. Yeah, I remember that one for sure.
How much? So that game snapped basically a 2+ year regular season winning streak, right? Obviously, you all lost the bowl game, right? But in terms of regular season, that loss snapped that streak. Did you feel, or was there any sense at all from the players, from the coaches, the pressure of that streak, of trying to keep that streak of not losing games alive?
Yeah, I remember that being a little emotional. There were some kids who expressed in the locker room some emotion, but I don't remember that really showing it until I don't know if the second loss was Cincinnati that year. I guess it was right?
Yep.
I remember the Cincinnati locker room, Adam. Like it was ugly. You have that sometimes. It's 18 to 22-year-old kids, and they're emotional. They put a lot of time and effort, and it's a highly emotional game. But that was an emotional locker room. The Cincinnati, you felt like, okay, one loss. I think the kids understood we lost in a really tough game to an ACC opponent on the road. And okay, we stubbed our toe. Let's go. The Cincinnati loss felt like the air came out of the balloon a little bit. And then again, I thought the Tulsa, whatever.
So Tulsa's next on my list to make you feel bad about. Sorry. But Tulsa, you talk about like late game mistakes. I distinctly remember kind of a late 4th down. Believe we got flagged for too many men on the field. Coach, How again, I'm sure it's a coaching play. How does something like that happen?
No excuse. That's on the staff. You can't put that on the kids at all. As a staff, I think that might have been coming out of a timeout too.
It was out of a timeout.
You look at those 2 games. Those 3 games, I think we lost by whatever, combined 7 points, whatever it was. Very painful. But we're coming out of a timeout. We're trying to match personnel. I'm not going to put the blame again. I won't call it the coach, but there was a coach who thought he needed a body out there, threw a guy out there. You get caught with 12, and that was painful. That locker room wasn't fun either, by the way. That was, all those. I mean, the Pittsburgh was the easiest loss, so to speak, but those next 2 were ugly.
Ugly how? Like, what are the emotions? Are people angry? Are they mad? Are they pissed off at each other? Coaches? Like, what do you mean by ugly?
Yeah, just highly emotional, upset. I think kids. I can go back, let's say Jacksonville State when I was here. When you have those kind of losses where the ones that are really hard to swallow, the kids put so much time and the emotions are so raw when you come off that field, and it's been 2 minutes since, and you're trying to have this talk, and sometimes it's hard to get kids to come back down, I guess is what I'm saying. And, in most locker rooms, that's not the case. When it's maybe after a great win, you got to corral them. But I think it was just, hey, guys verbally expressing their emotion, distraught, what the hell's happening? We got to fix this, looking to point the finger. I mean, that's what happens when you lose. People are trying to assign blame. And a lot of times it's the same things have been going on when you're winning, but winning's a great deodorant, as they say. So I just thought that the level of frustration guys were expressing verbally and some of the emotion, the tears, the distraught that they lost.
Yeah.
They're young guys. And when you're a coach, you get to do it again the next year, and you get to do it the next year. And, it's like this, this group up here last year at Tallahassee, when it doesn't go the way you want, man, and it's your last go around, some of those older guys, it's hard to swallow.
Who are the leaders on that team, right? I mean, Casey at this point is not around because I know he's rehabbing. Who are the leaders back then? Yeah, 2019. So Dylan Gabriel's still a true freshman. Like, who were the guys? I mean, I assume Titus Davis. Like, who were the guys that were really kind of grabbing guys and saying, "Hey, let's get it together"?
Because Titus was gone at this time, right? Titus was gone in 18.
Yep. Titus
was
gone. Yep.
I'm going to say in 19, golly, I'm trying to remember. The Joey Connors was gone. Tristan was gone. We lost the entire room. We lost AJ Wooten after 18. We lost the entire room after 18. Cocker and the whole crew. Yeah. So I guess when I go back, Tatum Bethune, I can't remember how old he was at that time. He might have been a young
freshman,
guy.
I think. Yeah.
Richie
you would have what?
certainly.
Cam Good would have been a young player then.
Cam wasn't a leader at that point. I mean, he was a young guy. I love Cam, and ends up playing at Michigan for the national championship team. I thought, slap myself on the back. I thought we did a great job recruiting the D line. But I don't know. It was Richie Grant for sure. If I remember, Richie was certainly a leader. Oh God, who do we have at linebacker? Bam was with us at that point. I think Bam might be hurt at that point, if I remember. But Bam was rehabbing from injury. I don't know. I can't remember.
Eric Gilliard was on that team.
Yeah, EG. He wasn't real talkative. Anthony Montalvo.
Nate Evans. Nate Evans is probably who you're thinking of.
Nate. Yeah, Nate. Nate was Nate was one of those guys. I want to say Randy Charlton. Yep. Maybe as a young guy was starting. Kenny Turnier was starting to take maybe a leadership role. He was starting to D-tackle that year. It had a good year. And anytime you play well, that it gives you a little bit of clout in the locker room. So those guys, as they started to play that year, I think they maybe started to emerge as leaders. But, Richie Grant is who sticks out the most to me.
So this may be one of the dumbest questions I've ever asked, and I've asked a ton. So this is an honor for me. You said it earlier. You're actually correct on the stat. We lose 3 games that year by a combined 7 points. So you go 10-3, you lose by 7 points. But this is a team that's coming off of back-to-back New Year's Six games, basically 1 loss in 2 calendar years. And when you look back at it then and now, do you consider that year a success?
No, I really didn't. I mean, I think those are 3 games we shouldn't have lost. It'd be one thing if you go 10-3 and, you win a couple games you shouldn't have. I don't remember. Again, I'd have to go back and look at the score, but it felt like we won the games we were supposed to and then lost the ones we shouldn't have. And that's always tough. There's been years when you go 8-4 and you're like, golly, we were probably a 6-6 team. We're lucky to be 8-4. That was a 10-3 team that you thought should have been, one of those undefeated. Again, and that's hard, man. It's look at Saban. He's had 1, I think. So many things got to go right. But yeah, it just felt, again, Cincinnati. If you go back and look at that game, we had chances in the red zone in that game. And then defensively, if you go back late in that fourth quarter, Adam, you could have that we had a decision to make: kick it deep, stop them, use 3 timeouts, and force a kick, and give us a chance to go kick a field goal, if I remember. Or you can try to kick it on sides, recover it there, and if you don't get it, stop them, take the 3 timeouts, and force another kick. Right? There's 2 ways to attack that. We attacked it the second way. We kicked it onside. They had a 3rd or 4th and 1 at midfield. So because of that, a little past midfield, they went for it, where they probably wouldn't have done that had you kicked it deep. Does that make sense? So
yep, for sure.
I think about that game, whether it was us as a coaching staff or turnovers in the red zone. I go back, to like I said, the Tulsa game. If you don't get the holding call to start the second half, if you don't have the 12 on the field, I just thought we didn't do a great job. And then, of course, Pittsburgh, like I said, you jump off sides. I felt all of them were winnable games. So that was a disappointing season for sure.
2020 taxed all of us as human beings, right? Obviously, the pandemic and everything that's going on. And so I know there's a human side of just everyone kind of dealing with that. But you all try to play football during that time as well. How did that tax you as a coach going through that particular part of your life?
I tell people, like, if you hadn't, everybody had to live through COVID in their own way. But it was the most unusual thing I can, coming back from spring break, we'd had 2 or 3 practices, hype calls. It's a Wednesday. I'm coming back from Miami, went to South Beach with my wife, and all excited to start spring ball up again. And hey, we're not coming in Monday. Okay, this is going to be a week or two, and you know how it went. But having Zoom meetings, trying to get kids' attention from wherever we try to meet, and install defenses and keep it as normal as we could. That proved to be difficult, right? This, keeping a kid's attention, 12 kids, 15 kids at a time. We brought in guys. I bring in guys and the NFL players, scouts. I try to make it different. As it kept going into the summer, Adam, it was, how do you engage these guys when you can't be around them? So I bring in NFL players that are living their experience. I bring in scouts to talk about, just try to be creative and engage them. Then we came back from, the whatever you call it, the social distancing, and we come back to play football, and it's crazy because you can't be within 6 feet, but we're sweating all over each other. I'm wearing this face mask that I'm sweating through and spitting on guys, and none of it made sense to the kids. Adam, you go play at Georgia Tech, that you finally get to the season, and you go play at Georgia Tech, and you're sitting there taking your nose swab the morning of the game, and the rumor is Georgia Tech has 2 guys that tested positive, and the game's about to get called off. And it was just this emotional roller coaster. Every week, trying to manage practice, who was available, who wasn't, who had to quarantine, who had been in contact, and trying to trace all that. It was just one logistical nightmare after another, trying to get, 85, 115 kids and the staff to social distance to make that work, and then go. It was the oddest fall. And then you throw in, if you remember that 2020 season, we lost half our starting defense. They're going into the Houston game.
I was going to get to that at some point. Yeah, obviously some guys
so,
make some bad decisions there.
Yeah, I just that was just not a fun year for anybody in college football. It was especially not fun for, I thought, our 3 years there. Yeah. It was the worst defense we played. It was the least competitive we ended up being because of some of the things that happened. But yeah, COVID was just a mess, a nightmare for coaches and staffs trying to logistically figure out how to do business.
We lose to Tulsa again in the first, the first home game that year, right? We lose to Tulsa. Was there something in, I think at the time, I remember this, that Tulsa had sort of schematically maybe figured out, air quotes, how to combat the Heupel offense? Was there anything that you also as coaches where, I want to say they were one of the first teams to kind of drop into that like 3-3-5 kind of coverage, right? Like, did they figure something out, or did they just have sort of UCF's number just defensively in terms of the scheme?
Yeah, 2 things. I think that three down system really perplexed Heupel and those guys at the time. No matter what people did on tape, and Heupel will tell you this probably if you went back in this year's press conference, he'd say it again. No matter what you see on tape versus those guys, it's something different on Saturday. So people defend them differently because of the splits, the tempo, and all that. So, I guess to answer your question, my train just jumped at the track there, Adam. Say it again. Ask that question again.
Tulsa figuring out how to stop UCF's offense.
Yeah, so I think the 3 down, just where's the next hat in the fit? So in a 4-2, is the nickel being the 7th hat? Is the safety the 7th hat? Okay, that's pretty standard. If it's 3-4, okay, is the nickel that's walked out or the will that's walked out the 7th hat? The safety still could be the 7th hat in the fit, and not to get too coachy, but when you get in that 3 down hybrid defense, trying to figure out where the 7th hat, 3 safeties, it was amoeba-ish. And it was just trying to figure out where the next hat was coming in the fit. They had a hard time just, and then the ability to play max coverage at the same time and not have to play single high man-to-man. I think you could play some drop 8. I thought that was something they didn't like anytime we were together at UCF. It was something that gave them a little bit of the heebie-jeebies. So, yeah, they had something on us. And then I thought that particular season, a lot of respect for Eric Anthony and their strength staff. They were a really physical, big bunch that year. They were running the ball well, and they really out-physicaled us on both sides of the line of scrimmage that year.
Yeah, they had a first rounder on that team too. I think Xavier Collins ended up going first round for the Cardinals, right? So they had some talent, even though you think it's Tulsa, right? They had a ton of talent. The next week, though, Coach, was probably one of the strangest games I've ever seen in my life. If I told you that your starting quarterback threw for 602 yards, you'd go, "Oh, we killed those guys." We lose 50-49 to Memphis. Obviously, a late field goal that's missed. That was just a kind of shootout kind of a game. As a defensive coordinator, when I tell you that you give up 49 points, you've got to, again, that's got to be one that like wakes you up in the middle of the night and you have cold sweats.
Yeah, you never feel good like you played good defense giving up that many points. I remember that game in particular. Kevin Johns, who is now at Oklahoma, but anyways, KJ, good buddy of mine, was the offensive coordinator, and I remember I think Brady was back at quarterback, the kid that played the year before.
Brady White.
Yep. So we thought we had a pretty good book on him, so to speak. That was the singular. I think the singular worst, and there's a couple bad. BYU might be the singular worst effort,
Oh,
but yeah, that was that was a terrible effort on our part. Honestly, didn't have the kids ready to play. Kids were not ready to play. Yeah, that was before Memphis. Was that before Memphis? Or
that was Memphis.
I mean, before Houston or after Houston?
That was before Houston.
So yeah, you don't have the same excuse. I can tell you, we had the excuse for the second half. We didn't have the excuse at that point.
You guys killed Houston actually in that game where there was a lot of odds against us, right? Houston was a decent team back then, but that Memphis game was also famous for one other moment, Coach, that I don't even know if you were aware of at the time, and I'm sure it hit your locker room afterwards. Daniel Obarski misses a kick. Quadri Jones, second, third string quarterback, comes up. They get a little bit of a shoving match. It's caught on TV. As a coach, as coaches, how did you all kind of like diffuse that situation? How do you said earlier, sometimes it gets ugly. Sometimes folks are, tensions are high. How did you have to diffuse that particular situation?
I don't remember exactly how Hype chose to attack that, but I've had, we're in different instances in my career where you bring both kids down, you both kids in, you sit them down, try to, that's the best way to do it. Have kids come in and when they're less emotional, and hopefully somebody's contrite and, somebody can talk it out. If it's bad enough, if it's ugly enough, I think the kid probably owes an apology to the team. Sure. In a lot of cases, that's how you handle it, and I don't remember it being that big of a deal. And again, I don't remember Quadri, the exact, but I do remember it, but not exactly. But I'd say this, based on the amount of influence a guy has on a team, it might have an effect on how kids felt about that. But if a kid doesn't have much influence and, you kind of sweep it under the rug because the kid didn't have enough voice to really cause a problem.
Well, I mean, Alex Ward told us what was said. He was standing right there. So I've heard the story from a few different angles. But you mentioned obviously the unfortunate incident that happens that season, right? Several guys on the team end up getting in some trouble, having to leave the roster. As a coach, as a human, I'm sure you never want to see your team go through that. How did you kind of lead through that adversity, Coach? Where some of your big guys are not there anymore. And obviously, they're out. I'm sure there's a lot of hurt feelings. How did you kind of lead through that adversity in that time?
Yeah, that was really unusual just because the timing of it all, I think it was a Wednesday night, maybe a Thursday night. I can't remember. Late in the week, things like that, the information's coming in fast and you get two sides of every story. And then there's the truth and you're trying to get through all that and making a real informed decision. You got parents are getting involved and you're communicating with parents and all those things. When it becomes that weighty, that issue was, and the fallout that was occurring. Just you're having real honest conversations, trying to get to the bottom of it initially. And then with the team, the same thing, there's some things that you can't recover from. Every program I've been in, right. You talk about guns and, women and how you treat women. And there's things that, there's things we can help you guys as players, sort through. But there's things also that are beyond the pale. And so I think in that, then you have kids, whether they understand what we're saying, whether their teammates, who they choose to support in that moment, us or their teammates, that's what's wild, right? These kids, again, they're kids and that's their best friends. And they hate to see, these kids lose their opportunity and it's emotional. And so the fallout's real. And I remember being in the team hotel in Houston and sitting at dinner on Friday night, having that talk with a couple of the guys, what's next for these guys. And they were still very concerned about their teammates at that point. And, that's on the heels of, there was a lot of social unrest at that time, that summer. Sure. And it was just a really sensitive subject, to be honest with you. It was just, some really tough conversations. It was hard, very, very hard for us. And then, like you said, we went out and won that game, which was
pretty handily too, by the way, 44-21. I mean, it wasn't necessarily close. I mean, it felt like that was a game where the team kind of galvanized a little bit together at that point in time and sort of through the adversity kind of said, let's do this for each other. Houston was good back in those days. Yeah. I mean, and so that was a really good win.
Yeah, we felt good about that. I can't remember how that. I know we lost to BYU that year, and I don't remember. I can't. We said Cincinnati and
Cincinnati
and Tulsa. Was there anybody else that year? Was that the 3 losses? Or?
Memphis, Tulsa, Cincinnati, and BYU. So 6-4 was the ending record. Obviously, you mentioned BYU. That's the last one at Boca.
Yeah.
How weird was can you that just felt like a weird day from the start, Coach. I mean, and granted, in hindsight, they had Zach Wilson, right, a top 3 draft pick, who may or may not end up having that level of talent, right? But still, they had a talented team. But that just seemed like a weird game all across the board.
I just remember knowing that we knew who was going to opt out of that game at the time, having those internal conversations. We knew Richie's not going to play, anyways, we knew guys weren't going to play. We were already paper thin with the depth issues we just mentioned and some injuries. And I can remember sitting here as a defensive staff, knowing that when you play BYU, you're playing grown men, right? You're playing kids. We're playing with a very young roster now, some true freshmen. You're getting ready to go play Zach Wilson. They had a really good tailback that year, and their offensive line are a bunch of 24. That's what you play when you play the teams like Utah and BYU. The kids are coming off their Mormon missions, right? They go on a Mormon mission for 2 years in many cases. So I remember as a defensive staff thinking, having this discussion out loud, of all the teams you can put us with, that's the last team we want to be with. We had seen them, I think we knew there was 2 or 3 teams. We watched 1 or 2 games of each because I think they might have wanted some feedback from UCF at the time about who our desired opponent was. So we were doing some quick math. And the quick math was this: hey, anybody but BYU, of those 3 opponents, we don't want BYU. That's the worst matchup for us. Don't put us versus BYU for all these reasons. That's a nightmare. And, and then you go down there 2 games. It wasn't even a bowl experience. You go down there 2 days before the game, so you get 1 extra night. It didn't feel like a bowl. It felt like COVID. It felt like another month of being kicked in the teeth. And like, you'd almost rather just not go to a bowl, to be honest with you, because of the way COVID was and the way the team was. I think we'd all have been happy just to, call it a season.
Well, then, so let's turn the calendar then, right? So the calendar flips, and at one point in time, there's a day that the announcement is that Danny White's leaving. He's leaving UCF. He's going to Tennessee, and obviously a ton of shock around that news, right? And who's going to be the AD and yada yada yada. Then sort of late January, Coach, when do you start hearing, or when do you become aware that there's a possibility that Josh Heupel may also be entertaining that Tennessee job?
I remember going to Hype after our first year. I had a job offer to leave, and I didn't want to leave for all the reasons I told you at the start of the show. Plus, I loved Hype, and I did. Just a great guy to work for, and loved that staff, Randy, the whole 9. But I remember having that talk with him after year 1, saying, "Hey, in a couple of years, you're going to leave here." And I was like, "I know you are." I said, "I get it. I understand the business." I was like, trying to make an educated decision about this next job. Should I stay or should I go? And that was part of the decision that was hard to make, as I wanted to stay. I ended up staying and turning down this opportunity. But I knew at some point Josh was going to leave. And I remember telling him in that conversation, "Hey man, like, I wish you'd stay here forever. This is it's a sleeping giant. It's this, that, and the other." But ultimately I knew the business. I knew he'd leave. So, not a surprise. I thought he'd be gone after year 2. I really thought that someone was going to come get Josh after year 2. I was surprised that didn't happen after 23-3 or whatever it was, 22-4. I thought they'd come get him with the offense and all that, and having done it with 2 quarterbacks. And then when Danny went, I didn't know. I thought Hype made great sense to hire him. I didn't know if Danny would be allowed, necessarily to say allowed. There's boosters and power brokers at those kind of schools that have influence more so than some other places. And but it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, Hype's like, again, what I loved about Josh Heupel is this: he's about football. When you come in that building, when you watch him on the sideline, he's unshaven, which I'm not saying, but he's about the ball. Hype's about football. He's not about politics. He's not about he's about football. And I just knew he was destined for big things. He's the best offensive mind I've ever been around. He's the best I've ever been around.
How do you get the news? Does he call you personally? Is it a staff meeting? How do you get the news that he's taken off?
Through the grapevine, you start hearing days out, days ahead, and we're all kind of like talking as a staff, like, "Hey, have you heard about Hype?" And we came in, had a staff meeting the next morning. I think the news had gotten out. He had gotten out that he was taking the job. He called a staff meeting for that next morning, which, again, we all knew what that meant. He just broke the news in a staff meeting and said that he was taking a plane, and had hit the road, and would be communicating with all the folks in whatever way he had to communicate with them. So that was how we learned of it. But most of us knew through our coaching contacts that it was happening probably a day or 2 or 3 ahead.
So you walk out of that room. What's the next thing you do? Like as an assistant coach, and obviously a staff coming. Like what's your next move?
Call my wife. Tell her to call the movers. That's what you do. You hope against hope that that Josh is going to walk down the hall and say, "Hey, man, let's go. You're on this plane with me to Tennessee." That's what you hope. The first thing you hope is the guy that you've been, been there with is going to bring you with, because you love him and all the reasons you stayed with him. And you just know what the working relationship is, and so you want to be a part of that move. And then when that does not happen, and as a coach, then you're immediately on the phone and you're working all your network and trying to find guys and what's shaking, what's popping, hype's gone. I need work. My contract, I got another year on my contract, but I don't want to be out of work for another year. So you're immediately working for yourself, and you're still trying to babysit the class at UCF. You're still trying to help, Malachi Lawrence, you're still trying to get Matthew Alexander in the boat because, that's what they're paying you to do still. So you're working for you, making calls immediately, and then you're trying to reassure Matthew and all those guys that, hey, it's going to be fine here. And that was what we did.
One of the bigger conspiracy theories, Coach, I'd love for you to either confirm or set the record straight is, again, I said this off the top, but the day that Heupel's announced as head coach, Randy Shannon's also announced as defensive coordinator, right? Which seems a little out of the ordinary, right? But I'm not a coaching savant here, so perhaps I'm wrong at that. There always seemed to be an inclination that Heupel and Randy Shannon maybe weren't always on the same page, that they were sort of kind of co-coaches in some respects. Was there any division? What was that relationship like between Heupel and Shannon?
No, I think not a whole lot different than a lot of places I've been. He was an offensive head coach. He was going to give Randy a lot of autonomy to do what he did. Whether that was how he structured the way we staffed, and met, and two sides of the ball meet different as far as, how you game plan and what you're game planning for. He gave Randy all the autonomy he wanted. Never thought they were at odds. I really didn't. I do know the timing's unusual. There's no doubt. That is unusual, but no, I never felt that. I think what I loved about Hype, I remember having a conversation early in the evaluation process. We were watching the D lineman, and he didn't really care for him. I did. And he said, listen, I've been watching quarterbacks. I've been watching receivers and offensive linemen for the last 20 plus years. It's like, you've been watching D linemen. I'll trust you. If this is the guy you think we need to take, let's go take him. I love that about him. And I think he treated everybody that way. I think he gave Randy that same autonomy. Hey, Randy, if you think this you see fit, this is how you need to run that side of the ball. But it was still aligned, I think, with what Hype ultimately wanted and the core values of the program. I think what Randy did. So I never felt that, but I do. I think Hype just gave Randy a lot of leash, and I think confident coaches do that. I think guys that are really confident will give their staff enough leash to go do their job, and then pull them back if they can't, and if that doesn't work, replace them. But I thought he trusted his staff.
This may be a surprise to you. Randy Shannon, not very chatty in front of a microphone, so we didn't get to see or learn a lot about Coach Shannon. What was he like to work for and work with?
Yeah, he's one of the most fun guys I've ever had the pleasure to work with. It's a stressful environment, college football, right? We all know Saturdays matter no matter what you do the rest of the year. Those 12 Saturdays tell the story, and it can get really tight in the fall. It can get really tense. What I loved about Randy was there was a looseness to the room. He'd been a lot of places. He'd been around a lot of ball. I don't think anything overwhelmed him at this point. He felt secure, again, who he was and how he was going to go about doing it. So we just had a loose room. There was always music playing in our staff room. We had snacks all over the place, which the kids were, in and out always, because every kid wants a sucker or a cracker or a cookie, or, they do. They just come in, and we had this great relationship with our kids, because they'd come in and, Randy's only rule was, hey, don't talk football. When they come in here for a snack, so, all 8 of us would be in their game plan and watching third down tape, and Titus Davis walks in. And the only rule was you can't talk football, so the kids would come in. I just love that. I just love that, he's a gray head, so to speak, an old head. He's been around. But what made it the most fun for me was just that was loose. It was fun. We laughed, we joked, we took our job really serious, but not ourselves too seriously. And I see that a lot with coaches. We take ourselves way too serious. But I just And then I thought, Randy, much like Odell Hagens up here at Florida State, he did a great job making everything not all about ball, even in staff defensive meetings, group meetings, unit meetings. Sometimes it would be a life lesson. And I thought he was special that way. And that, kids respond when it's not always about football. But, and then the other thing I said earlier was I enjoyed the challenge of what we had to do, and which was be front multiple. It's hard to tell a kid, hey, you're the field tackle, and we're going to line you up in a 4-eye, sometimes a 3, a 2-eye, 0. And no matter how I line you up, no matter what front I call, when we call this call, you got to be able to execute in this way. That's a challenge. And for me, I was really overwhelmed by it, but that was fun. I got to where I enjoyed that. So.
Coach Shannon earned the nickname from the fan base, second half Randy, because he seemed to always do a great job at halftime adjustments. Was that a strength of his? Was that something that was legit? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you guys didn't call him. Maybe you did call him second half Randy. I don't know. But was that something that was legit, that he was masterful at sort of that halftime adjustment part?
Yeah. I really think the good staffs, you got your eyes on game day. So whether Randy's watching the boundary safety and the boundary corner, and Corey Bell's watching the field safety and the field corner, and Corey Ivy was watching the nickel, and me, and however it worked. I thought Randy, we did a good job being organized with Randy. Not everybody is as organized as you would think, and not everybody gets the feedback on every staff. And I just thought on that particular staff, Willie Martinez, another older, y'all have a great history with Willie there at UCF, and I just thought we had good information. And I thought, we were able at halftime. Randy was able to take that. He sees the game really good. Randy sees the game. And then again, Randy has that confidence. Randy's a confident guy, and he portrays that confidence. And he never got too rattled, just like our kids. And so I think kids follow his lead a little bit.
So a couple of weeks later, Gus Malzahn's announced as a new head coach at UCF. When do you kind of find out that your time at UCF is over? Did you have an opportunity to talk to Coach Malzahn about that staff role, or was it just kind of understood that he's bringing in a staff and that your services were no longer needed?
Yeah, I knew my time at UCF was over when Hype walked in and let us know he was going to Tennessee. I mean, you hope against hope somebody, gets it right. I mean, you don't want to uproot your family. You'd love for Jeff Levy or somebody like, I hope maybe they'd see to hire Jeff. I thought he would have been a great hire, but whatever. You hope against hope that maybe one of your buddies gets it. Maybe they hire Jamie Chadwell. I don't know. And maybe Jamie Keach, so you hope that, because again, it is a great place. But yeah, kind of right away, Gus was great. Like most guys, he called us in one by one and very nicely said, hey, I got a guy that I'm going to bring in. But I always appreciate when guys do that. Not everybody has to do that. They don't have to call you in, but you spent 3 years trying to build to a place. I appreciate a guy calling me in and doing it the right way, so to speak. But he was good. When you're bringing in your new staff, you need your soldiers, certainly. And,
sure.
We all get that.
Well, I mean, so I know you then head up to Florida State, and so this isn't the Sons of FSU, so I'll skip some of that. But you were there for one key moment, Coach. You were there to see McKenzie Milton come back out against Notre Dame in sort of a national game. Obviously, you had history with KZ when he was at UCF. You saw him kind of do that. He got a lot of national attention, which was just fantastic at that moment in time. How cool was it to be a part of that? Because you were there at the beginning, and now you get to kind of be there at that bookend where he has that big moment against Notre Dame.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, I love the kid. If as a coach, you just you feel like you're a football guy, and you love football guys. And he's a foxhole guy, and he's a guy that for the way he competed, you want to take a bullet for him. But he just, seeing that moment, I think they threw like a little corner route. I was standing like on the defensive side of the bench, so the ball was kind of coming right, from into my living room, so to speak. And I just remember, that was a great moment watching him throw that. And I hate it because I had blown my Achilles. So right when we got fired, I ruptured my Achilles. I would be in the hot tub every morning my first year at Florida State doing my rehab about 5:30 in the morning. KZ would be in there doing his rehab. And just to know what he had been through, to know what he was still going through, the pain, the drop foot, all the things that he was fighting. And it was awesome. It was just so special. And then part of it's almost like watching a thoroughbred who broke his leg and goes out there to run again. and can't run the same way. You know what I mean? It's almost that, you're like, God, dog. I mean, it's not the same KZ, even though you're super proud. You're like, you just know what he was like when he was at 10, and you know what it's kind of heartbreaking at the same time. It was cool in that particular moment. Just he's a great kid, so I was happy for him.
Obviously, you spent some time at Florida State, and now you're the director of football at Ascension Sport, which sounds actually really cool. You're one of the first coaches I've ever seen with a LinkedIn, by the way, so congrats on that. So what does one do as the director of football at Ascension Sport?
Short story long, at Florida State, we killed the portal. What we were able to do was weaponize the portal, and what I mean is we had a great structure in how we found guys at lower levels, whether it's Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, others, Tatum Bethune, who came from UCF. We did a great job identifying guys, having a plan, and then we weaponized it with our NIL money. And, we were very aggressive in how we saw that going. So as I'm there, I see the good and the bad. I see guys coming in, improving their draft status, going from 5th, 7th round draft picks to 1st, 2nd round draft picks. And financially, there's a windfall that comes with that, and plus the realization of your dreams. I saw the other side of it, kids coming to Florida State to be high-paid backups or leaving for financial decisions that weren't football decisions. And ultimately saw the way coaching was going and the way football was going, and started Ascension Sports. And so what that is we're helping kids in every way, but in I'd say it's representation, it's consultation, much like my players have had over the last 27 years, whether it's CAA or Athletes First or, whoever it might be. In that space, I've seen that. I've had my own agent, and so we're a full service representation. We have a huge facility in North Carolina where we can train pre-draft, summer work that we'll bring our guys up. We have just a huge facility workout. We're helping kids negotiate contracts. I think I've got my PhD in that here in the last 3 years at Florida State. And again, there's just a lot of ignorance in this space. I think kids need this. They need someone to help them navigate all this, find their true value. And then certainly coaches value it because in a lot of cases I'm aware of kids who they're not aware of. And I'm a resource for those guys, and the fact that they trust my evaluation. And, I just think we're trying to basically recreate Fisk and Verse and do that for kids. And instead of doing it at Florida State, doing it through Ascension Sports.
How do you think the upcoming potential house settlement and revenue sharing model, how do you think that'll kind of change NIL specifically and sort of college football overall?
It's fascinating. That's all I've done for the last 3 months is go around the Southeast and then on the phone across the country, having these conversations with NIL and GMs and, totally different conversation than I've had the last 27. But where it's going is this: you're going to see an infusion of money because everybody, if you're going to be in the Big Ten or the SEC and you want to be a player, you're going to have to operate at full, rev share. So let's just say it's 22 million this first year, and every football program is going to be around 15 million, right? So there's very few programs right now in the last 3 years that have been at that 15 million, Adam. So if you're saying right now, because the rev share coming and you're going to be an SEC or a Big Ten program, you're going to beat that 15 million or very close if you want to be a player in this space. So you're going to see is a ton more money in college football because every team that wants to play the big boy ball is going to have to come up and be as close to the full rev share as they can. So you're going to see an influx of money that we have, more money than we've seen for players. You're going to see it become NFL style, where they're going to be cap management, where in the old day, Adam, we'd come in there and we'd say, have 85 scholarships. We want 40 on offense, 40 on defense, 5 on special teams. Within that 40 on defense, we want 18 D linemen. We want, 8 linebackers, and we want whatever that equals, 12 DBs.
Right.
So that was how you budget your money. Hey, we suck at D-line this year, Adam. We need to go sign over budget. We got to go take a transfer, guys. We got, so that's how you'd allocate your money in the old days. Now you don't. Now, if you're at 15 million at Florida State, or let's say you're at Wake Forest, I'm gonna say, I don't know what they have. Let's just say Wake Forest is going to be at 10 million. Let's say they can't meet the full rev share number. That's going to happen with some schools. So now they're operating with a cap of 10 million versus another school is operating with a cap of 15.
Yeah.
So that you got to be smart. And I'm getting way off here, Adam, but your cap management, how much percentage of your cap do you want to put in that position? Sure. That's how you have to attack it now. So I have this many dollars for this position. All right. Let's just say we lose Tremont Morris Brash a year ahead of time, or Cam Good. All right. Now we have this much money we've added to because we've lost off our roster, but it becomes very NFL. That's the challenge for these schools and these kids. Who knows who's trying to talk or any kid. The joke was at Florida State, I remember the first 2 years, Mike would come in and say, do we have concerns about anybody on this roster going in the portal? And we go down the list and say, well, so-and-so's not playing as much. He might be frustrated. Or, hey, we heard Georgia, I shouldn't name names. We heard somebody called, and I don't mean that Georgia fan. Sorry. We'd hear somebody called and, was initiating contact. All right. So the first 2 years, Adam, we'd have these long meetings about who might be in the portal. Last year, we realized everybody's in the portal. They don't know it
every year.
They're in the portal. Everybody is, because somebody's going to reach out. But that's the challenge, So how do you manage that cap? Do you value the guys on your roster for roster retention? What do you have to go get? Do you have to walk away at some point because you can't meet that number? That's what's coming to college football, and it's fascinating.
Do you see? I was talking to a buddy about this today. Do you see colleges and programs kind of almost changing their model to like a pro style front office? Like I talk a lot about, it's a baseball analogy, but the money ball philosophy that the Oakland A's had, and we're in the bargain bin. So how do I find these guys with these traits at this dollar value? But that's a different skill set than ADs have today. That's maybe a different skill set than a defensive coordinator may have. Like, do you see schools having to maybe change their support structure in order to match what's going to make them successful?
1,000%. It's definitely going that entire NFL model, and that's exactly what you're going to see going forward. Is just what you mentioned. The GMs will continue to grow. The personnel side, the schools that are really organized are going to have college scouting, basically, right? Your pro personnel. You're watching what's out there in the portal, trying to develop the portal. You're going to have high school guys who they really focus on just the high school recruiting, and then you'll have guys who are your advanced scouting, which is a little bit different than pro personnel, but they're kind of the folks that you're playing that particular week. It's just you're going to grow it out. That's going to be different going forward, and then you're going to see multi-year contracts, right? You're going to see some of those where teams try to create their own leverage where they can't be leveraged every offseason, where there's going to be, I think payouts or buyouts. I think you're going to see it become more normalized that way as we move forward.
If people want to learn more about what you're doing at Ascension Sport, how can they find out more?
Yeah, ascensionsports.com is our website. It's fairly simple, fairly brief, and then I'm a good follow. I try to be educational on my IG, but we have our social medias as well. But it's
you got the lingo down. Do you have a TikTok? You seem like you got the lingo
TikTok, down. Yeah, I had TikTok. Here's the thing: basketball guys are on Instagram, football guys are on Twitter. So, but I'm trying to be better about the socials. It's but again, it's just crazy. It's fun right now. It's fun. I've enjoyed it, and the portal is just.
Are your coaching days done?
I don't know. I got 4 daughters, so 15 through 7. I'd love to spend more time with my family. This keeps me. I'm on the phone with coaches every day. I'm evaluating kids in the summer. I'm training kids, so I'm hoping it'll scratch the itch, Adam.
Yeah.
But you never say never. Us football guys are crazy. But again, if this portal is NFL football, and I think kids need help. So if we can help kids in this, and I can still scratch the itch, I'll see if I can make this work.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Coach. Before I let you go, though, I try to end every interview with some fun questions, kind of some random, could be about any subject in the world question for you. So I got some for you here. So here's my first one. When you were living in Orlando, you wanted a really good meal. What was your go-to spot? Where did you go when you're like, I just need a good meal today?
Winter Park, and there was a couple places. There was an Italian place on the curb, and I'm drawing a blank, but it was just off the main strip. And then there was another place that served Mediterranean food. So I'm awful on names, but Winter Park's where we went, and there was an Italian place and a Mediterranean place we loved.
Who was the strongest player that you encountered in your time at UCF? The physical, strongest, most imposing player?
I thought Tristan was so explosive and twitchy, and Tristan Hill was just an extremely powerful athlete.
We joked earlier, Coach Heupel had a lot of Heupelisms, snap to whistle, all 3 phases, I get on the grass. Did you have a favorite Heupelism?
I just love how he coughs a lot. It's like
he did cough a lot, yeah.
And that always made me giggle. That's my Heupelism. Speak it into existence. That's one speak it into existence. That's he was very positive in that way, and I remember that, speak it into existence. That was one of his leading charges for us when we met with our kids. Speak it into existence.
Did anybody on the staff do a Heupel impression when he wasn't around?
Not that I recall. I can't remember any of the kids doing it. No, I don't remember him having any impressions. No.
We talked to a bunch of players in the Coach O'Leary days, and they had a nickname for Coach. They called him White Horse. So whenever he was coming, they would all go White Horse, White Horse, and that was kind of their code word to say, hey, get mind your P's and Q's. Coach is coming. Any code words for Coach Heupel that you're aware of?
Not that I remember. I don't remember ever having that. That wasn't his personality. I never worked for George, and when George walks up, I get I pucker up. And so George just had a whole different personality about him. So.
He called my phone one time, Coach, and I literally thought, I was like, oh man, am I in trouble? Like, wait, I don't work for you. Like, why am I upset? Can we be honest about one thing really quickly though with Coach Heupel? Again, seems like a nice guy. Orange is not his color, right? That's just not his. Orange just doesn't work. I don't know what it is, Coach. I don't know. He's a bigger guy, maybe. Orange just doesn't. I don't know.
I wish I could say something. I need to go work out right now. I haven't worked out in probably a year and a half. No, I can't make fun of him, man. I got my own grass to mow. So.
Orange just doesn't work. And the other thing we used to joke about Heupel a lot as a fan base, he was known for wearing what we call the shacket, which looks like a half. It's a jacket, but it's a shirt, but it could be a trash bag material. How did the shacket come to be in the Heupel wardrobe?
I think if you're a guy like me and Hype, we got a little bit of a pot belly there. It's nice cover. It just kind of gets you covered. You don't have to tuck anything in. Okay. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's I always like those things. It's loose and again, I love that he. One of the things I loved about Hype was the dress code in the office. There was not a dress code. I could wear a ball cap in the office. I could wear tennis shoes. I loved it. It was just about the ball. He was never worried about it. I think probably somebody put in his locker. He never thought twice about it. But it's nice for heavy guys.
I think he actually said that too when we asked him one time. I'm always fascinated by this. What do you former coaches do with the gear from the schools you don't work at anymore? Like, so do you have Rutgers gear still laying around? Do you got Iowa State gear still laying around? I mean, what do you do with the former gear of the school you're no longer with?
Yeah, I keep a lot of it because I'm one of those weird guys. I got stuff from high school. I still got high school T-shirts I wear. I'm weird. I keep a little bit and then I give a lot away. So we did a garage sale in Orlando and what we couldn't give away, we sold. The only thing I keep is the tennis shoes, right? Because I just keep the tennis shoes. I'll wear them anywhere. So all the clothes, they got to go back. And then
so do you have any UCF gear still? Do you have any outside of shoes, any UCF stuff?
I do. I got some Citronaut gear. I got a signed helmet by McKenzie because I love that kid. So I have a signed McKenzie Milton helmet. I have several pictures that just mean a lot to me on the field with my family, winning the conference championship or some of those things. But yeah, I have a lot of gear. I have the national championship T-shirt, one that says National Champions. I have a long sleeve. And somebody gave it to me when we first got there. And I said, I'm going to keep this because even though I wasn't part of it, I think it's a fun shirt. So I wear it sometimes just to piss people off in Tallahassee. So
we know players often use different things to motivate them. Music being one of them. Do you have a go-to song before game? Is there a song that you like to lock in with?
Not anymore, but if I had to go back to my playing days in South Carolina, Danzig, Mother would be one of my final ones. Very angry. Mother, do you want to
walk away? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that was one of the last ones. And then I think Phil Collins, In the Air at Night. That's always that's a classic. But as a coach, no. But I tell you what, I did love. One of my special favorite memories about UCF is the student section pregame with D-line. We'd do our pregame, and you'd come out there, and both those student sections would be full, and they just give energy to our guys. And I remember that specifically. Just a lot of great memories there at UCF. We really enjoyed our time there.
Yeah, the bounce house certainly does bounce. People don't realize that, but that thing gets shaken underneath, right, when you're in the locker room.
It really does, and again, just it gets loud. I go back to the Cincinnati game, maybe in 2018. I think they had 2 false starts to start the game, and they affected the game. I mean, the stadium would move, and you get energy from that. But they affected the game, and as a defensive line coach, that's money for us because we're a half count, maybe earlier, or we're using their timing. I thought the crowd at UCF was a weapon for us.
And a final fun one for you, Coach. Who from that coaching staff do you still keep in touch with today? Who are the people that you still talk to and kind of keep tabs with? I know guys move around. A lot of offensive guys went with Hype. I know Golish is now obviously with the Cows. I know Halsey's doing well with Coach there, right? Yeah. So who do you still keep in touch with from that staff?
Yeah, I do a terrible job staying in touch. But Randy and I, obviously, together the last 3 years here at Florida State. So Randy and I have stayed very in touch. Nick Toth, the special teams coordinator, now at Air Force. Corey Bell, who was at Mississippi State with Jeff. those guys have all remained in touch with me, and we stay in touch. On the offensive side of the ball, I've lost contact with a lot of those guys. You know, probably on the offensive, Darryl Wyatt, talked to him a couple weeks ago up at Boston College. But yeah, don't talk to many. Jeff Levy, obviously. You know, Jeff, I went up to the Mississippi State-Tennessee game, actually. Didn't see Josh, but sat with Staley Levy.
Who do you root for there? Who do you root for in that game?
I really didn't care, to be honest with you.
Okay.
If I'm going to be political, I don't care. You know, honestly, they're both great dudes, and they both got great jobs, and happy for them both. And so I was just looking for a good game. I took my old man, took my daughters, and just had a good time.
KZ's coaching up there now. What do you think about KZ as a future head coach?
Yeah, it's funny. We'd sit in that hot tub, and he had a lot of thoughts about the Florida State offense at the time. And I remember, you know, he had been exposed. You know, and this is an educated kid. We'd sit there and talk, and so he's got a football mind. I'll tell you that. Like, we'd sit there in that hot tub at Florida State, and he's coming off Scott's offense that had a lot of success. Of course, Hype's offense, and Jeff and what those guys did. So he knew this wasn't just some kid. Like, we'd sit there and talk ball and about what he did and did not like about what Mike and those guys were doing. So the kid knows ball. He's a good coach. And like I said, I think when you have that leadership ability, it translates to coaching.
Yeah.
You know, all those traits will serve him well as a coach.
And see, he looks good in orange too. He's a guy who pulls off orange really well.
He's the best, man. I love that kid. I really do. I love him. I do.
All right, so Coach, if people want to kind of get caught up with you, kind of follow along with what you're doing at Ascension Sport, how can they? I imagine you're going to be busy over the next couple of months here. So how can they follow along? Yeah,
on the web, ascensionsports.com. But if you really want the best follow, I'd go to Ascension Sport 1 on your X at Ascension Sport 1. We'll put it all out there, and then at Ascension Sports on your IG is the best place to find us.
All right, we'll make sure people out there give that a follow. Coach, we appreciate you for taking the time. Obviously, wish you best of luck in this kind of new, really interesting endeavor you're a part of. And anytime you want to talk some UCF ball, we're here for you. So appreciate your time tonight, and have a great one, okay?
Thanks, Adam. Go Knights.
Charge on.